Okay, so I'm en route to go and see Spider-Man No Way Home right now in Croydon Grant Cinema. It's either choice of that or Croydon Purley Way. 9:30 showing, then I'll give you my review. Hi everyone, this is AJ. Welcome back to the channel. So I'm back from seeing Spider-Man No Way Home, and I'm going to give you my review and my thoughts on the film. Now I'm going to do this in two parts. I'm going to give you a non-spoiler review, then I'm going to give a warning, and I'm going to step into spoiler territory. So be sure I will put a warning up. So if you don't want to know any spoilery stuff, then don't watch beyond the initial part. I will, like I said, I will give you the info. So anyway, so let's talk about this film, shall we? Okay, story-wise, so this film picks up where Far From Home left off, with J. Jonah Jameson coming over the billboard and giving away Peter's identity. This obviously leads to certain effects on Peter's life, negative effects, shall we say. Nothing overly too bad, really, in a sense. He still sort of gets on with his life, with people being aware. But it has a sort of connotations with his friends, Ned and with MJ and their college applications and this sort of a thing, or, you know, university applications, getting into MIT. So thusly, this is when he goes to Doctor Strange and requests Doctor Strange help him out. And Doctor Strange says, yeah, we can do this spell where everyone will forget that you're Spider-Man, you know. He goes, and then Peter, obviously, we've seen what's in the trailer. Peter goes into, oh no, I need Ned to know, I need MJ to know, Happy, May, you know, everyone who didn't know, I need them to remain knowing, and it screws up the spell, and thusly allowing people through who actually know Peter's identity. You know, then it leads to a bit of a sort of confrontation with Doctor Strange, and this sort of stuff. So the film's not very strong on narrative. It's not very strong on story. Beyond that, I mean, there's some small character growth within the film, obviously, but overall story arc of the film, there's not great to get into because of the multitude of characters within the movie itself. Now, obviously, warning bells for people might ring because obviously Spider-Man 3 had a multitude of individuals in it, new characters. Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 had the same issue. But this film does it somewhat better than they do. When Marvel do it, they do it better. And there's a reason beyond that. It's because they've built all the character growth up in previous films. That's no exception here because, you know, most of the audience is already introduced to all these characters that have appeared in other films, and thusly you don't need to give much in the way of story when it comes to introducing those characters. So there's that. Also, what Marvel tends to do is that whereas Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 had loads of separate storylines going on because they had to introduce these characters, when Marvel do a big, huge blockbuster, like you know, where there's a group of people together, like the Avengers films or Civil War, and now this, all your characters are involved in the primary story, and that's it. You know, beyond that, there isn't much in the way of them having their own little story arcs or anything like this. So it makes it easier to follow this narrative. So the film is very good. It's got some crowd-pleasing moments in it. Some of the, you know, audience members were clapping, this sort of thing. There's some surprise cameos. You know, there's a couple of end credit sequences and this sort of a thing. Like I said, the issue I have was with narrative. The film is a lot darker in aesthetically than the previous Spider-Man films. The acting's fine. Musical score's good, with introducing elements that you will have recognised from historically. And overall, a fun movie. It's not as wow as what I thought it would be. Let's just say that. It's not, you know, there's certain scenes that I would have filmed differently to give more of a heroic stance to them, and they're all over pretty damn quickly, this sort of thing. So, yeah, it's a good film for the most part. It gives a kind of finality to this Spider-Man, to this even though this Spider-Man can and will continue, it gives a sort of finality to him, in a sense, in the step forward. And I'll come into that in the spoiler section. Now, in the spoiler section, so yes, it's a thumbs up. So I'm going to delve into my spoiler section now. Now, in this section, I will go into the story more so in detail. I'll go into the cameo appearances. I'll go into the scenes that I felt didn't work for me. I'll go into characters that pop up, things that occur in the film. So if you're not interested, I suggest you switch off now. So, so now begins my spoiler review. Okay, so we've already established the story. Peter Parker, everyone knows his identity, Doctor Strange, magic spell goes wrong, all these characters come into our dimension. So we're talking about Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Sandman, Lizard, Electro, this sort of, all those characters. It's fantastic seeing these characters back, very good. Now, Sandman and the Lizard are primarily in their CGI guise throughout the entirety of the film. You don't see them as Rhys Ifans or Church was his name. I can't remember his name, the actor who played Sandman now. Anyway, they do appear at the very end of the film in their human guise, but you think that maybe they only had them for one day's filming or something. So a majority of the film is them in their CGI guise. There are some appearances in the film from characters. Well, I'll say the primary one that got people clapping was Charlie Cox. Yes, Daredevil. Matt Murdock. He appears as Matt Murdock, as a lawyer for Peter Parker in one scene, which is fantastic. He was great, so it'd be great to see more of him if they bring him back. There is tragedy within the film. Peter Parker gets his Uncle Ben moment, but with Aunt May. Yeah, she gets killed by the Goblin. Now, the film sees Peter double-crossing sort of Doctor Strange and wanting to help these villains. And thusly he frees them from their confinement that Doctor Strange has them in, and goes about with their help trying to find a cure for each one of their issues. Only Doc Ock gets cured. A new inhibitor chip is made that Peter puts into the back of his arms, and thusly the real Dr. Octopus or Dr. Octavius comes through. So from this point on, he's more of an anti-hero in the film who helps Peter out. The Goblin is double-crossing them and kills Aunt May. Electro is power-hungry. He sees the potential for this world. Not Mysterio, sorry, he's not in the film. Sandman is distrusting of everyone, but does want to get back for his kids. And the Lizard still wants to turn people into lizard people. Yeah. So, you know, there's a lot going on in the film. It's very busy. Obviously, the big appearances are Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. Now, they both pop up within the film at about the halfway mark, and it's a joy to see the both of them again. It's a joy to see them interacting with one another and interacting with Tom Holland and all three of them coming together like this. So, a lot of great stuff there. Now, There are certain scenes that you've seen in the trailer, like where MJ falls from the building or from the scaffold, and Tom Holland jumps after her, but he gets caught by a goblin on the way down, and thus it's Andrew Garfield who has to save her, sort of mirroring the moment in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But the problem is it's a blink and you'll miss it moment. There's no sort of emotional resonance within that scene. It's just one and done. There isn't no sort of, it's not played out in such a way that is he or isn't he going to catch her or save her, or is it going to be a repeat of what came before? It's literally, Tom Holland dives off, Goblin comes in, Andrew Garfield, Spider-Man, dives off, catches her, so that puts her to the ground. There's, and then he's a bit upset, obviously, like emotionally upset, because he's managed to do what he didn't do before. But there's no emotional resonance on the way down. It could have been done far better, directed far better. You could have had clips with Emma Stone, flashbacks in his mind to that moment as this was occurring, or it could have been prolonged and slow mode, and like I said, is he or isn't he going to catch her? That sort of thing. There's other issues I have in the film in the story department as well. Obviously, Peter, MJ and Ned, they get rejected. Their applications for MIT get rejected because of Peter being Spider-Man, and Ned and MJ, their connection to Spider-Man. However, Flash Thompson gets his MIT application accepted, even though he's actually gone about publishing a book about his memoirs of him with Peter Parker as his so-called best mate, which makes no sense whatsoever in the context of why Peter and that didn't get in. Do you know what I mean? There's silly things in the narrative like this, but that's just nitpicking anyway. But overall, it's a good film. I'm sure I'm missing a lot out. There's two end credit scenes. One which disappointed me entirely, which starred Tom Hardy as Venom. The end scene of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. We catch up with Tom Hardy there. He's learning all about this world and about Iron Man, and about the Hulk. And then get zapped back to his own world, leaving behind a tiny bit of the alien symbiote. So hence this is how Venom will come into the MCU. So Venom coming into the MCU isn't the Venom that you already know. It's going to be a new Venom, like an offspring of that Venom. It kind of destroyed the end of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. But then it wouldn't have made no sense anyway, keeping Eddie Brock in this universe with the fact that Venom film had set up the character of Toxin in the police officer within the film. And then the very end was it wasn't really an end credit scene. It was actually a trailer for Doctor Strange 2, and that was very good. Looking forward to that. And it's nice to see the sort of misunderstood, as I call him, Dark Doctor Strange appear, possibly the one from the animated What If series. So it'll be fantastic if that does happen, and fantastic if we get to see Peggy Carter. But overall, the film was enjoyable. It's no better than the other two Spider-Man film that we've got thus far. It's, it drops the ball on the narrative. It's quite weak. It's fantastic seeing all these characters again, but I do feel that some of the actors didn't exactly slip back into the roles as well as they did, as well as they could have done. The time being away hasn't been good to them getting back into, ain't like they've put on a pair of gloves or a pair of slippers, a well-worn pair of slippers. It's kind of like they sort of like, not exactly who they were before, so to speak. You could make up an argument that for this, that they've grown, all this sort of stuff. But, it's because they haven't played the character for so damn long. It's all very good. Overall, it could have been a lot more emotional at the end when the characters return to their own worlds. But all that stuff's not really played into, unfortunately, when I feel missed the beat with that sort of stuff. Now, during my last segment, I did mention about where this film ends, where it ends up for the character of Peter Parker, Spider-Man. So by the end of this film, no one remembers Peter Parker. They don't remember. It's not that they don't remember him being Spider-Man. No one remembers Peter Parker. It's got a scene where, you know, he's saying his goodbyes to MJ and Ned, and he says, I'll come and find you, and I'll tell you, and you will remember, this sort of a thing. But at the very end, Peter goes into where MJ works. As he walks in, she starts smiling, but then you see Ned's walked in behind, and obviously Peter's ignored, and he comes to realise that the both of them have actually got into MIT. He orders a cup of coffee, and he sees MJ, where she flicks her hair back. She's got a plaster on her head because she was injured during the fighting that occurred prior. Only a small injury, but he sees that, and he comes to realise in himself that he can't. It's not said. It's you know, filmed in such a way that you get to realise from his emoting that he's not going to tell them. He's not going to put them through or into the danger of knowing that he is Spider-Man, and thusly leaves. We then see that he's now got a new Spider-Man suit, and that he's made himself more of a classic look, very light blue to it on the blue. He's no longer got the Stark technology, because obviously Doctor Strange now doesn't know who he is. No one will know who he is. So this is where I say that the film ends on a certain finality for this character, in that you can bring him back in a trilogy of films like what they're discussing, but it would be Peter on his own without the weight of having the MCU behind him or anything like this. So this is how Sony could now take the character, and if Sony wanted to do a Spider-Man trilogy with Tom Holland and not mention much about the MCU itself, they can go ahead and do this and introduce new characters. You know, they could introduce their Gwen Stacy, this sort of a thing, you know. And you don't have to see MJ again. You don't have to see Ned. Happy Hogan, there's a scene at Aunt May's funeral at the end, and Peter's, well, not funeral, a gravestone, and Happy Hogan's there and talks to Peter, and Happy doesn't remember who he is. So all that Iron Man connection, all the Avengers connection, all that sort of been wiped from people's minds. It's almost, you know, like it never happened. But this is narratively, this is Marvel putting Spider-Man in a position whereby he can be utilised by Sony out of the MCU, or they could narratively put him into the MCU again somehow, some way. Yeah, but that's what I mean by a finality for the character. So there, we're sort of ended on that sort of on that. We're ended on that. But anyway, but overall, you know, and I've recently just done a ranking for all the Spider-Man films yesterday, actually. Obviously, with the exception of this one. I left this one out because I hadn't seen it. But if you want to know where I'd put this one, I don't know exactly where I'd put it. It may be in 3rd or 4th spot. Definitely with Spider-Man 2. You know, Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2 and Sam Raimi Spider-Man 1 above, and then going into the Tom Holland ones, and it would sit maybe middle of the table with the Tom Holland ones. I don't know. I really need to give the film another watch. But it's certainly sort of middling of the table, middle to top, but not top. Definitely not top 2. And if I include Into the Spider-Verse, not in the top 3. Into the Spider-Verse done this concept far better and far more emotionally than what this film has. But anyway, that's just me. That's my review. This is AJ. Thanks for watching. Please consider hitting the subscribe button. Let me know down in the thoughts what you thought of the film. And yeah, and I'll see you later. Take care all. Goodbye.